I can't hear you. 1 second. Let me try to get some sound here.
Okay, I got my sound. I was on mute. Bismillahir Rahmanir
What's going on
Rahim.
here?
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil
Can you hear me though?
Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So yeah,
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
mashallah.
Okay, you guys can hear me. I can't hear you. 1 second. I'm trying to get the sound. Just give me 1 second here.
Okay, so we just the news has come in about the George Floyd case. As we know, George Floyd was murdered last year
1 second.
by a police officer by the name of Chauvin.
What's going on here?
And yesterday he was actually convicted of murder. And as we know, last year, this actually spurred some of the largest civil rights protests in the world for a long time. And what's interesting about these civil rights protests is it was broadcast all over the world. It wasn't just in America where people were protesting. People were protesting in my hometown, in Manchester, in London, Birmingham, UK, all over the world. There was an uproar because, we're living in an age of technology where everything is filmed. People have a camera, a 4K camera in their pocket these days, and somebody actually filmed the murder of George Floyd. The police officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck for nearly 10 minutes. Now, anyone who's involved in combat sports, myself, I used to do jiu-jitsu, and when your neck is, when your oxygen is deprived, within 15 to 20 seconds, you're going to be unconscious, and within a minute, 2 minutes, you're really struggling for your life. So, the fact that there was such a visual of, people actually watched George Floyd die on camera. I thought, with the trial today, I thought it'd be good to actually get a few of the brothers on from the other side of the pond, from Canada and America, who have experienced some of these things themselves. Of course, in the UK, it's very different. There's not as many guns. There's not as many people being killed by police. It's not also the same, quite the same historical history of racism, quite the same as the Americas. I just want to give salam to the brothers who have joined us, Brother Abu Tawba, Harun, and the features, Brother Bilal. Jazakallah khair for joining us. And
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
hopefully we can have
Barakatuh.
hopefully we can have some interesting discussions. First of all, just before I want to go to Brother Harun, because I know he has to leave very shortly. But he has some experience with these things as well. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Harun.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good.
So what do you think about the recent conviction of the police officer? And also, if you can tell us a bit about your experience as well, that you've had personal experiences similar to this as well.
No. Well, the outcome of the trial, I think most people would view it as something to be expected because of all the protests and violence that was going on in America. But 20 years ago, I don't think that outcome would have been the same. Back when I was 17 in Toronto, growing up in Toronto, there was a similar situation. The police, they're just out for the black youth. Basically, there's a lot of shootings going around, a lot of black youth being killed by the police. And when I was 17, like I mentioned, the same thing happened. We, growing up, we're in a little bit of trouble, nothing really serious. But one situation that comes to mind, it's a kind of bittersweet situation. Bitter because my best friend, we went to school together. His name was Wade Lawson. And Dwight Hilton, we went to the same school together. We lived in the same area. And what happened, there was a stolen car, and the police, they were called in the area because there's some suspicion of a stolen car being in the area. And my good friend Mike, he was driving the car, and he was trying to get away from the police, right? So the police, they opened fire. They were plainclothes police. They went on the scene. They're basically going to kill they're trying to kill us basically. Why I say that, because the details came out in the trial that these police officers, they went with some hollow point bullets in their guns, and we all know what hollow point bullets do when it hits a target, right? So they shot at the car when it was speeding away from them, claiming it was self-defense, but the car was speeding away from them, so I don't know how that was self-defense. They shot in the back of the car. They shot Mike in the back of the head with the hollow point bullets. My other friend, who was in the passenger seat, the bullet managed to lodge in the headrest of the other seat, so it didn't go into the back of his head. And so after the car stopped, because the driver, he was shot in the back of the head, the car slammed into a gate. The police came to the car, dragged them out of the car, and the guy who was shot in the back of the head, they started beating on him, calling him nigger and what have you. The other one, they handcuffed him to a tree, and the police came and the whole drama. And then what was surprising in relation to this whole Floyd thing, this whole trial started happening, the police were charged for murder, of course, and the trial started, but the judge, he wouldn't let the evidence of the hollow point bullets and other evidence to show that these police were going to to try to kill us. He wouldn't let all of this stuff into the trial, right? The jury weren't allowed to hear it, and it was just on the side. So
yeah.
It's
so there's like the police kind of like an immunity, like they can just do what they want.
They can do what they want, and they're acquitted, and no one was surprised they were acquitted. And if you look at most of these cases around the police shootings, they end up being acquitted. Nothing comes out of it. And it wasn't until all of these protests and all of these people raiding all of the properties and breaking into malls and shops and fires burning all the place, they see how serious the situation is getting. So now, we got to find them guilty. You know, I don't know what the evidence was exactly. I didn't really follow this whole Floyd thing, to be honest. I never seen that video of the police kneeling on the guy's neck. I didn't want to see that, Yeah. This is where I'm coming from. I didn't want to see it. So I wasn't following the whole trial. But I knew that he was going to be found guilty. Why? Because of the violence, not because anything else. They just want to try to avoid all of the drug. Can you imagine what America would be right now if he was found not guilty?
Yeah, subhanAllah.
The streets, they're still blazing the streets up to now,
Yeah. So it's like what it's expected that he's going to be found guilty, because there'll just be mayhem, complete mayhem, and
it's basically systemic racism, and then shortly after, this was in '88, so shortly after, I'd say a month after I was arrested, I had over 35 charges. They arrested me, brought me to the police station, stripped me naked, beat me down for 2 days, and then when I went to trial, they planted evidence against me, of course, and alhamdulillah, I had a very, very good lawyer, so he was able to bring this out in court, that the evidence was planted against me, so all of the charges got dropped against me, But so that's why I say it's kind of bittersweet. There is some kind of, in Canada, I don't know how it is in America. Abu Toba is going to touch upon that. He's very informed about what's going on in America. Yeah. But Canada is a little bit more, I'd say a little bit more justice, not as many people being killed. Yeah. Nowadays, it's,
The thing with the States, with America is they can choose a biased jury, and the outcome is guaranteed whatever you want it to be. You've got very clear kind of groups of people that are racist, and you're guaranteed an outcome, and hopefully we'll get onto that in a moment about America specifically. I know Sheikh Abu Toba has a lot of insight into that, and also the features. But yeah, Brother Harun, when you said that you didn't watch the video of George Floyd, you see, people who have been through this trauma, people who see this as real life, who have had this experience, they don't want to see the video. But for most people, it's like a movie for them. They don't connect with a human being. They don't realize this is real, and it's important that we as human beings, we have a contract, we have a social contract amongst each other, really, to look after each other, to help justice, to pull out your camera when things are happening, to speak up about these things, and I can't even imagine what it's like to be raised, as a Black person living in the States. I mean, even from the stories you told me about Canada, I mean, the UK is bad, okay? And I thought I kind of understood, the streets, if you like. I've been living in certain places, but when I went to America, when I went to the States, Chicago and New York, and you go to these communities that are highly segregated communities, we don't have that in the UK, really, and you create this segregation in schools, in politics, in even where people are living, that people don't, they dehumanize the other.
Can I get in here, because I can't stay longer? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I was listening to what you guys are saying, and I think that from the very beginning, you started off on the wrong foot. You mentioned this was a civil rights issue. This has nothing to do with civil rights. It's a human rights issue. And as long as we keep addressing it as civil rights, it plays into the hands of the racists. It has zero to do with civil rights, has everything to do with human rights. What is segregation except for another word of apartheid? In an apartheid system, people are segregated, they're separated. People do not want to believe that the United States is an apartheid system, just as bad as South Africa was, or worse, because at least South Africa was able to call it apartheid by its name. America pretends that we don't have that situation anymore, but it's pseudo, it's like that. So you have 50 plus countries, 50 plus African countries, and more than that from the world countries, the global countries, who got together and made a UN resolution shortly after this whole thing started. And it stated that they recognized that the African American was under systemic racism in the United States. And so this is an oppressed people, no different than what we find happening to the Chinese people, the Uyghur people, the Ronghai people. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. The Philistine people. Whenever we mention any of these groups, people say, oh yeah, I hear that. But then if you mention it for the African American, they say, oh, that's racism. And we give them the finger, because our people are literally dying every day. Last year, there was only 12 days in the whole year when African American was not killed by the police. 12 days. And there was only 2 days in a row that he wasn't killed. But they make up for it, because on some days they killed 8 of us, 9 of us, 10 of us, 17 of us in one day. So we have to first put the right spin on this. This is a human rights issue. This is the spill off and the continuation of the slavery that went to Jim Crow apartheid. Now, Jim Crow apartheid ends in 1968, and now we're still breaking down this system. And you see, if you look at what the Republicans and the different ones said, they just changed the language of racism to say crime. It's amazing. You never find black policemen killing white children, beating up white women, even killing white culprits. But you can find on every YouTube station, white policemen beating up minor children, minor black children, for anything whatsoever. And there's no outcry. And the people in the United States, the Africans in the United States, have been making outcry after outcry after outcry, that they water down our outcry. Oh, you guys are complaining again. This ruling that they made is not impressing anybody. It's not enough. No one's going to accept it as enough. You know, like Harun said 20 years ago, you got to think about Rodney King. They had it on camera and they didn't do anything. So, you know, now they did something. No, they have to change the system, and the people are not going to. And if they are satisfied, it's just going to continue. And there's another thing. What sense does a black man have for giving up? What sense? If he gets pulled over by the car, why should he stop? Why should he be peaceful? Are they going to do anything less than kill him? What do they have to threaten him by? If he gives up, they kill him. If he fights, they kill him. So rather to die standing on your feet and giving something back than to continuously allow them to kill you. So I say to the African American man, you got two choices. Leave that country, make hijrah, get out of there, become a refugee, go somewhere else. And now with this UN resolution that recognizes that African Americans are an oppressed people in a systematic way in the United States, you have the international legal go-ahead to seek refugee status in different countries around the world and to get financial help to do that. Either do that or fight. Otherwise, you're just a punk. You're just waiting to get punked by these people again. And if you're not going to stand up and fight for yourself, don't expect anybody else to do it. That's what I have to say about this situation.
SubhanAllah. Sheikh, just before you go, I wanted to just touch upon some of the experiences you personally had, because you've shared a few things with me in the past, and they're very visual, especially not just from an African American perspective, but from a Muslim perspective as well. Some of the things you've experienced with, and why it's important for a Muslim too, especially an African American Muslim and Muslims generally living in America, should be looking at alternative places, and why? Because some of your experiences.
I mean, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't. We don't need another, experience. Everybody, there's so many experiences on the YouTube that you can see. You could just Google event after event where the police are harassing people. You have events that you can Google where the black people call the police on a white guy. A woman calls the police on a white guy who hit her minor child, and the police came and beat up the woman and her daughter. I mean, these things you can't make these things up. A white man kills a whole bunch of people in the church, and they take him to McDonald's. They capture him peacefully and take him to McDonald's. I mean, you can't make these things up. There are too many examples of online for us to say we need any more. The bottom line is, as I said before, we have to do something. And if they don't change the system, then people have to see it within themselves to get up. As a Muslim, you have a double reason to do that. For the quality of your life, the quality of your deen is tied on top of that. But as an African American, on top of that, the racism that you can avoid, I don't know what to say, brother. There's an example. Remember the black guy that was out in Central Park bird watching, and he tells the white woman, "Hey, clean up after your dog." And she gets on the phone and says, "Oh, I'm afraid there's a black man." And they caught that. on camera and everything, and they put it on a big thing. No one can deny that this white privilege and this terrorism can be held over a black man's head at any moment. And every time we've been saying it, and any white woman could just come and say, hey, he raped me, oh, he intimidated me, he did that, and it will be believed. And in that case, they caught her on camera. Has there been any changes? Look at another situation on YouTube. A white woman thought she lost her things or thought someone stole it. She accused a little 12-year-old boy who was in the area. You know, all these things, this is straight racism, and the system allows it. There's no penalty. There's nothing to go. You're allowed to do this type of thing. So my own personal experiences, mashallah, you know, I'm just a regular person when it comes to these types of things. We've all experienced it time and time again. And I just feel that unless we do something different, we shouldn't expect anything different to happen. You know, and that George Floyd, I watched it. I watched that George Floyd, and it took me a while to watch it because we are traumatized every time. Every time we watch these things, we're traumatized. And when you see this last one, you think about the very first one that you ever saw and all the ones in between, and they affect you psychologically. So when I watched it and I saw the confidence and the arrogance through which he killed that man, I said, this has to stop.
Yeah.
We have to do something different.
Sheikh, you recently did something different, and you left the States, and I've seen how you subhanAllah, I seen when I first met you, when you first left, and the I would say trauma almost that you was affected by these things, and people don't realize, Sheikh, people who are not in that situation. That's why, I'm asking for examples and things like that, because we can't even imagine, Sheikh. When I interviewed you for my podcast, and we were speaking about, where you grew up and how many people were murdered just in them things, not just by police, but by drugs and everything. We can't even imagine the state of affairs over in the States, and I just want to ask you, really, like, do you think people who are in that situation, living in the States, they become not immune, but they don't know what situation they're in because they've never been out of that situation? That is their reality. Like when you came to Turkey, like now you feel more free, you feel relaxed, you're not looking over your shoulder, and what do you think about that?
You're right. When you first leave the United States and come to a country where you're allowed some rights, it takes you a while to adjust to that environment when you're not used to getting any rights. When I first came over here, if I saw a policeman, I would get mean, because I'm preparing. You never feel comfortable around police growing up in the United States. But over here, you look at the police, he'll look at you and he'll say, "Assalamu alaikum," or you say, "Wa alaikum salam." You're staring at him, wondering what's he looking at, and he's staring at you saying, "Assalamu alaikum," or "Wa alaikum," something like that, or "Marhaba," or something like that. There's no animosity there necessarily, and you have to get used to that. Like you said, you're numb, but you're not numb to the point where you don't realize what's making you numb. You have to steel yourself up, or you're going to break down. Coming out of that environment, it takes some time to allow yourself to relax and not to, think someone's walking up too close to you, and, being so confrontational in the rest of the world. So yeah, I could see that happening once someone comes out of that environment. But they got to come out of the environment. You can't stay in that environment and then, expect something different to happen unless you do something different yourself.
Yeah.
And no one can blame you for, for resisting, because the government has shown no activity on themselves to protect your life. What are you going to do? Gonna get me my rights after they kill me? You get my point? After people riot for months on end? You get my point? And then you give me a little bit? You get my point? No,
Yeah.
man. People will be are damn fools to allow themselves to continue to be treated like that. Black men need to stand up, and I bet you, if the black men fought back every time, if they refused to stop any time, there will be immediate change. There'll be immediate change. But they say, oh, don't be violent. You don't never want us to be violent when you're being violent with us. That's this dual thing. Oh, we shouldn't promote violence. Why not? You're being violent with me, and you're telling me I shouldn't punch you back after I'm getting punched in the face. I'm being murdered, and you're telling me I can't fight back. Isn't that unfair? I mean, literally, we're being murdered left and right. And you're saying that I'm promoting violence by saying that we should fight back? No. Again, I give them the middle finger.
Sheikh,
Black men should fight back or leave. Two choices. The Prophet ﷺ and all the prophets, they made hijrah when they couldn't do anything else about it. Leave that area. And if you're not, then fight and become a shaheed.
Sheikh, you have, for someone who's living in their bubble in the States, people who live in America are known to be in a bubble. They think the world is America, right? And they don't have experience with traveling. They've never been to Europe. They've never been to Arabia or Africa. Can you just give them a bit of insight what it's like as an African American traveling in the world, meeting different communities of different races, and explain how it's not all like America? Sometimes people are reluctant to travel because they just expect it to be like the States.
You're right. Well, alhamdulillah. That's the sad thing about the United States, is that it's so geographically far. It's on the Western Hemisphere that African Americans men especially, don't get out. Even the women travel more than the men, globally. And so they don't know what to expect. They think that I can only make it here in the United States because that's what they've been told. Part of the reason is because they don't have a skill. First thing you need before you can travel someplace, you need a skill that can allow you to trade and make a living, no matter where you go. But once you travel, you will realize that the world is a lot more peaceful than the United States. Europe is more village than it is city, and if you go to different countries in Africa, like we look at Ghana and in these places, you think that they're third world countries, but no, these places are up on the top. You go to Tanzania, these places have a lot on the ball. You got Ethiopia, you got South Africa, you got different places that you can go to. You have Asia, Japan, you have China. Well, not necessarily China now, they're going through their thing right there, but there are different places around the world that you can literally go to and be accepted, and no one won't even notice that you're black. Meaning that they'll notice it just like if you have a brown shirt on, okay? But it won't be their main thing. The other thing that prevents people from making that overt step is language acquisition. They only want to go to a place that they can speak English. We have to get out of this one-sided mentality. If you're just stuck in that one-sided mentality, just English, then you're restricted to the areas that you can go to. But if you're willing to open your mind and learn other languages, there is a number of places that you can go to, and the world is humongous, and you will find a whole world to live in. Here in Turkey, there are like tens of places that if you went to Izmir, you'd never know what Bursa looked like. Okay, it's a whole different world. If you stay in Istanbul, is so big you could stay in different parts of it and never experience the other ones, and spend your whole life there and never get tired of the different flavor that's there. And then Ankara, and then if you go to different countries further in Central Asia, there's a lot of things going on. But we have to try. We have to just give it a shot. The best option is to leave that country. Is that what the Prophet ﷺ did? That's the best option. Alhamdulillah. I'm sorry, I'm still sick, so I'm going to have to get off here.
I know you've been sick, Sheikh. May Allah cure you and bring you back to full health. I don't want to take too much of your time. So, thanks for joining us and giving us some insight into
Jazakallah
that.
khair, barakallah fikum.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, subhanAllah, I spent some time with, quite a lot of time with Sheikh Abu Toba, and he's shared a lot of stories with me from the States, and I can't imagine what it's like, growing up, especially the time he was growing up. You're talking 70s, 80s, 90s. It's bad now, but it was so bad, even worse then. But yeah, it's like a lot of people can be fooled by the media thinking, well, this is good, things are changing, they've convicted the police officer, but in reality there was no other option. He had to be convicted.
Yeah.
Well,
what a lot of people don't understand is that, even if you look at the civil rights era, for example, that was only in the 60s, the 60s and the late 50s. Our parents lived through that. The people are still alive from that time. You understand? And we have eyewitness accounts of what was going on at that time. And the civil rights bill, the voting bill that happened in, I believe it was in 1965, I believe, right? One of the main factors for them to expedite that bill, it was because America was on fire at that time. America was burning down. There was mass riots all over the place at that time, right? So why do I mention this? I mention this because white supremacists, the language that they speak is violence. So let's parlay. Let's talk. That's what they understand. They only understand the language of violence. So it's now becoming, their moves are now becoming more predictable. Sun Tzu, the man who wrote The Art of War, he wrote that if you don't know your enemy and you don't know yourself, then you will lose your battles all the time, right? If you know your enemy and you don't know yourself, or if you don't know your enemy and you know yourself, you may win, you might lose some, right? But if you know your enemy and you know yourself, then you have nothing to fear. White supremacy is a system that is hundreds of years old, and they have built this system in understanding what they want to do and understanding themselves. So they know very well, because they know their history very well. And a lot of the people don't actually understand what the history behind the point that we got to George Floyd. They don't get it, right? A lot of the younger generation, maybe 20s and 30s, they won't remember Rodney King riots. They won't remember when they bombed, I believe it was Detroit. You know what I mean? They won't remember any of this stuff in the 80s. They won't remember the riots in the 60s and whatnot, but they remember George Floyd. So it's important to understand your history and know your enemy and know yourself. It's to understand why your enemy is reacting the way that they're reacting. This whole George Floyd verdict, it's a double-edged sword, because on one side, you got justice, but look at the lengths that had to happen in order for that justice to actually come into fruition. You had to have a man video recorded, on somebody's phone, right, who was kneeling on a black man's neck for over 9 minutes and died slowly. Then on top of that, not only did you have national protests, but international protests. Then on top of that, the majority of the protesters weren't even black. They saw that. They know exactly what they're doing. You understand?
Yeah.
So they had no choice but to give a just verdict. That's why you got a just verdict. because they saw a slave rebellion coming. You feel me? If that same man, Derek Chauvin, if he had shot George Floyd, I promise you, he would have walked if he shot him.
Definitely.
Right? But it's only because of the level of the slowness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Taking your time to kill a man slowly. That's the only reason why they threw him under the bus. And mind you, we haven't got the sentencing yet. We don't know what his sentence will be. All we got was the verdict. And as the Sheikh said, Sheikh Abu Toba, if you're Muslim, right, then we believe in two options: hijrah or fighting. We don't have the ability to fight these people, but we can build for ourselves. We can move somewhere where these people aren't and build like a functional community. That is a reality. We can actually do that.
SubhanAllah. You know, you're right about the shooting, you know, and the sad thing is that if he would have been shot, I don't think the protest would have happened either, because
it might have happened because there is a history of protesting for the shooting of black men and boys and even women, right? We had the Breonna Taylor protest. We had the Trayvon Martin protest. We had many of them. There's so many.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's so many people been killed by the police, even on the day of the trial.
There was a young girl who got shot an hour before the actual judgment on Derek Chauvin in Columbus, Ohio, right? So this right here, what we got to understand is that you're talking about, like a lot of people have this idea about racism is about feelings. That's not racism. The way you feel about somebody, right? Like if I say I hate you today because you're red bearded, right? Does it affect you economically? No, it doesn't affect you economically. Does it affect you socially? No, it has no effect on you. You understand? It's just me hating somebody because you got blue eyes or whatever, right? Racism itself is a system which necessitates the oppression of one group over another, right? And from that oppression, you get economic perks for the oppressive class. You get human capital. You get human resources from the oppressive class and whatnot, and you strip away the rights. But the stripping of the way of the rights of the oppressed class is not just for stripping them away. No, this is a manner of dehumanizing that class. You understand? That's what racism is. It's not how you feel about somebody. You can say that you can be prejudiced. I know it's used interchangeably, right? This racism and prejudice is used interchangeably, but that is not when we're talking about racism, we're talking about a system, and racism as it exists in 2021 is a white supremacist system. This what the Sheikh was mentioning about the apartheid system and the segregationist system in the States. This is a copy-paste system that is used internationally, right? All over the world, just by different names. So in the North, they called it redlining. In the South, they called it segregation. In the South Africa, they called it apartheid. In Brazil, they have the same system in Brazil. Up until this day, they have this system. The same system in Mexico. The same system all over South America. It exists. This grouping of racial groups in the poorest areas and making sure economically that they can never climb out of their condition, right? Unless they sign off on white supremacy. You understand? So this system here, right? it has always allowed for the the unfiltered killing of Black folk internationally, not just in the States. It's just that it just so happens that in America, the Black people in America just happen to be, if you compare Black people to the rest of the world, Black people in America just happen to be in the best situation compared to Black people internationally. Not the worst. That's the best case scenario for Black people internationally. Are you hearing me? Mm-hmm. If you go to Africa today, why do people see Africa as a country? It's because anywhere you go in Africa, you're going to find poor Black Africans, really poor, really Black Africans. You understand? So the perception is that people generally see Africa as a country, not a continent. Because this system, this white supremacist system, has been imposed on all of those nation states. And that's why I say that Black people don't have a nation of their own. Mm-hmm. Right? We have colonies under the thumb of white supremacy. Mm. You understand? Yeah. Up until this day, Haiti is paying reparations to France, right, for the slave rebellion that happened in the 1800s. Same thing with what's that country?
Same with Guinea, Conakry, Mali, Senegal. They're still paying to France.
They're still paying France. They pay taxes to France. Are you understanding me? So this whole, going back to Derek Chauvin, all right? I know it's like a lot to unpack here, right? But going back to Derek Chauvin would have gotten away with that if he shot George Floyd. I promise you.
Yeah, I agree.
It's only because the whole world saw a Black man get killed very slowly and methodically, that puts pressure on that white supremacist system to actually throw one of their own under the bus. You understand? That's all that is.
It'll be interesting to see the actual what sentence he gets, and if they allow him to appeal after so many years, and how that's going to pan out. Because I'll be surprised. The maximum sentence is, what does it add up to? The maximum. Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think it's about 70, 80 years maximum. Mm-hmm. But he could be out in 30, could be out in 25. Who knows?
He could be out in 10. Like, honestly, speculating on the sentence, all we can do is go by the history of the country. This is the first time something like this has happened. Mind you, if you look at the Jim Crow era in the States, where there were mass lynchings of Black people, right? They would turn it into a family sport. You will find many pictures, right, online, where you find a Black person either hanging on a tree or burning, right, tied up, burning on the ground. And you will always find it's not just men. They have women. Are you hearing me? They have women and they have their children there participating in the lynching of Black folk.
Yeah.
You understand? You go on online today, okay, you'll find these other outright outlets like Sky News and whatnot. And even I saw one from Candace Owens today. Candace Owens, right? This white supremacist in blackface, right? Today said that Derek Chauvin did not get a just trial. It was an unfair trial. She said that. Yeah, she said that.
Wow.
Sky News, again, Sky News, what they did is that, oh, you can't make George Floyd out to be a martyr. He was a drug addict. He abused this one. So there's a history now of victimizing the victims. The victims of racism, you victimize them. And the oppressors, you leave those people alone. And this has crept into even the Muslim thinking, where you victimize the victims of racism, and you leave the ones who are actually inflicting racism, you leave those people alone.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
You know, this whole verdict is a political thing. You know, Fred Hampton, he said, politics is war without violence, and war is politics with violence. We are at war. We have been at war for a long time. You understand? We've been at war for a very long time. It's just now that you find the Muslim community, some of the Muslim community actually catching up and realizing, okay, maybe there's something wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
They're figuring out, but Black people always knew this, right?
Yeah.
So,
SubhanAllah, it's interesting perspectives, because I think a lot of people are going to think, wow, you know, they're going to be shocked by the outcome. But, you know, when you actually look at it in detail, it had to be that way. You know, they had to convict him because, you know, when we're seeing what happened with the protests and everything, you know, it's just so obvious, you know, what happened. As well. And, you know, realistically, you know, how much hope should we really have that this is going to change anything? The only thing that it can possibly change is maybe the behavior of the police, where they realize that when they're being filmed, that they're going to be held to account. But when they're not being filmed, then they're good to go. They can do what they want again.
well, even the filming of police, that hasn't really changed their behavior at all, right? Remember, they started using the cameras because of complaints, and police. This is the first time I've ever seen a policeman, right, ever being charged with the murder. A white policeman being charged with the murder of a Black man. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't. It didn't happen with Breonna Taylor. That police officer got charged with murdering a wall or drywall, right? It didn't happen with Rodney King, and that was on video, right? It didn't happen with any of our slain black people in the Black community. How many thousands of them are there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Didn't happen not a single time. So this was a political move. See, I keep reminding the Muslims and Black folk, right, that the white supremacist, he is playing three-dimensional chess, and you're still trying to figure out how to play checkers.
Yeah.
And the idea that you're going to live with the devil and ask the devil for justice is ridiculous. You understand? These people, they are extremely, 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 extremely evil people. Very evil people. They have a long history. Their track record is like, look, if you look back at the time of slavery, for example, right? They used the church. They used the church to justify not only the capture of human beings, right? But the mass torture of human. They justified it with the Bible, and there's so many verses they used to use. You know what I mean? You know, the slave must love his master. You know, so what they have, you know, done every single crime under the uddership of Allah, right? In the name of God, right? Every crime, killing, rape, torture, mutilation, separation of families, kidnapping, you name it. And on top of that, shirk, right? And on top of that, making a human being less than another human being based upon the color of their skin, right? So if they can say that God signs off on this, if that's your God, then who's your devil? You understand what I'm saying? If your God allows you to rape, kill, murder, mutilate, separate child from mother, all this kind of stuff, torture, you name it, your God allows you to do that. And on top of that, you're still taking human life without any reason up until this day. Then what do you have left for the devil to do? What work does the devil do in your religion? You understand?
Yeah.
So Muslims they really need to wake up and smell the coffee, because this issue with white supremacy, in my humble, and I told you this many times, in my humble opinion, white supremacy is the single most pressing issue internationally today that needs to be dealt with. Nothing, in my opinion, nothing trumps that. All the wars that we have happening in Africa and the Middle East, it's a direct result of white supremacy. The wealth gap between the races and the ruling class is a direct result of white supremacy. You know, all the chaos that's happening. This has to be dealt with, right?
How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? Of course, Islam technically has the answer to that. You know, but realistically, how do people go forward, and what does an African American living in the States need to do? What should be the call to action?
Yeah. Well, again, this goes back to what I was saying about knowing your enemy and knowing yourself, right? I've said this many times, that the enemy has infiltrated Islam, and it's very, very clear, right? And they kept us busy fighting each other instead of fighting the actual enemy. How many Muslims do you see, right, actually going after these kuffar directly? Very, very, very few. Very few. Muslims got it backwards. If you look at some of our Salaf, like for example, if you look, for example, at the example of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, right? Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, why was he so successful, right? He used to make alliances, right, with all the Muslims despite their, whatever differences that he had with them. You understand? So he would make alliances with the Fatimids at those times, you know, Ahlul Sunnah, whatever, because he's Ash'ari, right? He's making alliances with all the Muslims and saying we have a bigger issue to deal with here with these crusaders. Anybody can go and look up his autobiography. It's widespread. Right? He said that this enemy right here is the most pressing issue that you need to deal with. We don't have no time to be fighting with each other. And the Salafis got behind them. They got behind them and they fought the Crusaders. But our enemy right now is even more brazen, way more brazen than the Crusaders. And not a single person. I won't say not a single, but I will say not very few Muslims have the bravado to stand up to it, because they know that maybe they might not be able to work or whatever, you know, they might not be able to work anywhere. They might not get their political spiffs. So they sign off, you know, on white supremacy to get a few butter biscuits. You feel me? So going back to what we should do, as I said before, we have to call to a real Islamic unity, and we have to build functioning communities. Right? We have to build functioning. This idea of building the masjid, that is not working. That is not working. I'm sorry. Donating to the masjid. You find all these Muslim kids leaving Islam with pretty soon they're going to be more misajid than Muslims if you keep doing that.
Yeah. SubhanAllah, bro. It's good insights from yourself. I just thought I would do a live, to bring some attention to the case, because a lot of people didn't even know. Even Abu Toba, he wasn't aware that the police officer was found guilty.
On all three counts. Yeah.
Pardon? Yeah, all three counts. Yeah. So I just wanted to bring a bit of attention to it. And for those of you who don't know the Features has his own channel, and he speaks about different topics. And I recommend that you, go and check out his channel. What's the name of your channel?
The Features. The Features on YouTube. Yep. And you can catch me on Instagram and Facebook at The Features as well.
And you can also go back to some of his older videos, more nearer the time of, when this incident happened, because I know you was covering that a lot.
Yeah.
This past year, you've been very active in speaking about, about this and raising issues about it and discussing it and debating it as well. And people can learn a lot from your experience and insight. As I said, the Features, sometimes it's just difficult for someone like myself to truly understand, because we're just not aware. As I said, England is a totally different ball game. Not to say there's no racism there. Of course there is. Of course, that's the origin of white supremacy in England. But the point is, it's it's difficult for an outsider living outside of the States to truly understand, the level. And I recommend, if somebody's watched my podcast with Abu Toba, the first podcast which we speak about, I think it's the first one, he just discusses the state of the black communities in America when he was growing up, and the level of drugs and murders and crime that was going on in these areas. Why? Because they were being pumped with drugs and fed with drugs from the government, fed with
CIA run programs.
Giving access to drugs and firearms and things like that. SubhanAllah, and it has a knock-on effect for generation after generation. As you mentioned, it's impossible to get out of the rut, right? You're just stuck. You're stuck. And it's not easy to get out. So I recommend you, to becoming more knowledgeable on this, more informed on this topic, to go to the Features channel, and you can learn something about that as well. And as I said, something unique about the protests for George Floyd was that there was all communities were joining in. You had
exactly that never happened before. And that was the unique thing about that particular protest, because we had Rodney King, we had Trayvon Martin, we had so many different protests. We had the protests in the 60s. You know what I mean? We had all kinds of race riots and whatnot. This is the first time that all races came out in support on Black people, and because of this. I was George Floyd even before George Floyd. You know that already. And I was talking about this white supremacy stuff even before the protest, right? Yeah. But this thing right here put Black people on the map internationally. And now there's a global awakening of Black consciousness, which has never been seen before. And as a reaction to that, what you see is a step up in white supremacy. And it's happening right now. A lot of people don't know that in Georgia, it put into law voter suppression laws. And once one state puts in voter suppression laws, which is essentially Jim Crow laws, there's no difference between this voter suppression law, what was happening in the Jim Crow period, right? Other states will follow. In Florida right now, right? In Florida, okay, this is happening, right? They put into law an anti-protest law. And in this law, in this bill, right, they put a caveat in there that if somebody runs over a protester with their car, right, due to due to self-defense, they can't be charged. That's a real thing. The voter suppression law puts a caveat in the law itself that you cannot give water. Are you listening? You can't give water. Yeah. To people in line trying to vote. This is happening in 2021, not in 1921. You understand me? Right? So yes, white supremacy is the reason why Muslim countries today, and I said it before, the black struggle is the Muslim struggle. Y'all just didn't catch up yet, right? You didn't catch up. We've been going through this for a long time, so we know what it's about, right? You guys complaining about Muslims being called terrorists and all this kind of stuff, and you know what I mean, and all these laws in France. We've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's something that Allah is showing the earth now, right? That through one man, Allah Himself opened the eyes of millions of people, and you can't unsee what you saw on that video with George Floyd. So there is a global awakening happening right now, right? And honestly, for the Muslims need to be in the forefront of fighting white supremacy, not in the background. That should be our number one focus. Not, spending, 50, 60 videos on where is Allah, not, you know what I'm saying? Not spending 50, 60 videos on all these other things. You know what I mean?
Because Islam does have answers for this, and that's why you did see, a big influx of African Americans come into Islam. Of course, the Nation of Islam had a part to play in that, which were not necessarily following the correct Islam, but at the same time, they were following parts of what Allah told them to do, which is looking after the community. It was these aspects of Islam that they actually followed, which drew people to their religion.
Exactly.
And also that led people on to come into the true Islam, and Islam does have the answers. It's and I think, as you said, if Muslims are at the forefront, at least supporting and understanding, like you said, it is the same struggle as Muslims. We're going through that now. Like I don't think you got this in the States, but in France now it's illegal for someone under 18 to wear hijab.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
And here's the killer, all right? Black people generally, we do not hate anybody ever just for the color of your skin. We don't do that. Like, I've never seen that just on like in the Black community, where we're just gonna hate on somebody because of their race. We that's not something that's in the Black community. You feel me, right? It's not something that like, if, for example, if like in my particular family, I have cousins married to white people and Oriental people and whatnot, and Asian people. It's not a thing. It's not a thing where we're gonna basically trash people for doing these type of things. We don't do that. However, right, the Muslim community has a long history of anti-Black racism. And I mean a long history. So if you look at France has never, ever, ever been a country that has ever loved Islam or even liked Islam. If you look at their history, look what they've done in their colonies, okay? Look at the stuff they did in Algeria and Tunisia and these type of places. Beheading thousands of people, forced conversions, in Algeria. You know what I mean? In Mali, recently in Mali, they bombed a wedding. You know what I mean? But this is something that's going back hundreds of years. You understand? Way back even at the time of Napoleon, when he invaded Egypt. But they never had a history of loving Muslims, right? However, the Muslims, if you go, those same French Muslims, right? Those same French Arab colonies of Muslims. If you go on YouTube or internet, whatever, Google right now, just type in Lebanon African workers and see what you see. See what you see. Type in Algeria Black Africans. See what you see today. Type in Morocco. You see what you see. You'll be shocked. You'll be shocked. In Morocco, killing black men in the street, right? In Algeria, just insane racism. You know about Libya already. Libya's Italian though, but Libya, they're enslaving black people and raping women and forcing them into prostitution. These are Muslim countries doing this. So now the Muslims, they're getting angry at France for doing what France does, okay? France is doing what France does. They've been doing this stuff against Muslims and Islam for a long time. But you have no work, nothing to say about the Muslims dropping the African laborers in Lebanon at the embassy, just leaving them without food, nothing. You have nothing to say about that. You have nothing to say about slavery in the Muslim world. Nothing, not one word. Murder. You know, you remember we talked about segregation that happens in Tunisia, that happens in Algeria. So
yeah,
you see, the Muslim has in 2021, they have this warped sense of justice, which has nothing to do with the Quran and the Sunnah at all. If you are just, justice has to be for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Because Allah himself is al-adl. He is the most just.
Yeah.
He's the most just. So you have to show justice. And when you don't show justice, then Allah describes, you know, the people who don't show justice, they're oppressors, they oppress themselves, whatever. You kind of, you know, it's difficult to feel sorry for this hijab law when you're doing stuff like this in the French colonies.
Yeah, I get it.
You know what I'm saying?
SubhanAllah, bro. Jazakallah khair. Thanks for joining us. We just give people a little taste of what you do on your channel. And, you know, SubhanAllah, thank everyone for joining us. We're going to have to leave it there because it is Ramadan. I need to get something to eat and drink. And
Jazakallah khair. Thanks for inviting me, bro. It's been an honor.
Well, you know, I hope that someone got some benefit. I definitely learned a lot. You gave me some interesting perspectives there. You know, from an Islamic perspective, you know, it's interesting. We you know, we have selective outcries, you know, on certain things.
Yes, you know, that's what it is.
You know, we forget actually, and we don't think that there's many other things that are happening. You know, and sometimes we may be being punished because of that.
That's my personal belief. I do believe that the Ummah right now is being punished because of that same thing that you're saying, right? Yeah. And I'm saying it so that you can know why we're being punished. That's why I'm saying it. You know, a lot of people don't like you know already, man. A lot of people hate me for the stuff I say, but it's all real. Anybody can research it right now, right? And they can see for themselves. Yeah, right? I'm not making it up. Right. And then you wonder why, you know, Muslims are catching hell, you know, when they have no sense of righteousness or justice at all when it comes to Black Africans or Black people. And when they get oppressed, they want to complain and cry foul.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair, bro. That's all we got time for today. I hope we can get you back on later, inshallah, for another day. And as I said, you know, we encourage you to go over to the features channel and check out some of the videos there. Jazakallah khair, bro.
It's been
a pleasure.